What up, saucers?
What up, saucers? We are going to be talking
What it
about...
do, baby boo?
We're going to be talking about something that's just so much fun. It's just so fun, if
So
you get a guess by our title. Toxic masculinity. Yay!
Yes. Yay!
Insert golf claps. Yeah, this one is going to be interesting because obviously as women, we have a very, very keen and interesting perspective on what toxic masculinity is. And it's not just an issue. And, it's not just like something that like women are, obviously by the title, like women, we are going to be suffering from this, but like it's not, but we can't just be the ones talking about it. Like men have to be talking about it enough too, because obviously they suffer from it.
I think that
immensely.
they misunderstand what it, blanket statements of like, I think it's a misunderstood term, which is contributing to the lack of, I don't know, like the lack of awareness
Education,
sometimes, because the term can, and it shouldn't be, it's pretty, as women, obviously it's like, it's a pretty basic concept, but I have noticed the reason I even thought about this is because I was having a conversation recently with a guy in my life, and I love him. We share the same political views, the same values, and like all of these things align to the point where I bring this up because it's like, even he had a misunderstanding about what this term means. He had he kind of like bristled when I brought it up, and it was like really disturbing to me. And I was like, what? Oh, actually, he said it back to me in air quotes. He was like, well, with toxic masculinity, he put air quotes in it. And I literally I went off. I lost it. I was like, I'm sorry, why are you air quoting toxic masculinity? It was like, well, that word. And I was so disturbed. I dug into it with him, and it was like an hour and a half conversation. Ended well, but it highlighted, that's when I realized like, okay, there's something happening. And I think with men in particular, and the disturbing thing is it's like men who, like I said, share my values when it comes to, and, feminist views. But this term was rubbing them the wrong way. And then I learned why. And I was like, oh, no. We need to communicate better. Like this is, because when I explained it to him after this whole conversation, by the end of it, he was like, oh, I do see that. I didn't see it that way. But basically, it's a term frequently heard these days and it's thrown around a lot. And I'm sure it's used incorrectly at times, and that can contribute to it. But there's the misunderstanding from... So when I dug deeper in this conversation I was saying with my friend, I realized there's a significant misunderstanding of what it actually means. Many men are taking it to mean that masculinity is toxic. And instead of understanding that it refers to the negative aspects of exaggerated masculine traits. Yeah. And I get like, if you don't dig into it and you're like toxic masculine, I don't know. I'm like, okay, if you're not thinking about it at all, you might think we're saying masculinity is toxic, but that is literally it's the opposite.
We're pointing out something that's unique to what masculinity is. You know what I mean? And perceived masculinity.
In its exaggerated negative form. Like, and so masculinity in itself is a very beautiful thing. When feminism, for example, like when any concept is misunderstood, or taken to the extreme, it can manifest.
Misandry, like feminism with misandry. Yeah.
Yeah. So like when feminism is misunderstood or taken to the extreme, it can manifest as women saying like, fuck all men, I hate all men. And this response, while understandable considering all the injustices women have experienced through generations, it is an overcorrection. Like it's not... Right. It's not accurate to say all men are this and you can't. But that level of anger, that's like when, when black people are like, oh, I hate white people. All white people are this. Yeah. Yes, it's not fair. It's an overcorrection, but it comes from a very real place of pain and oppression over, hundreds of years. So it comes from somewhere. However, if we're going to get anywhere from where we sit now, we need to break that down and be like, okay, you can't just go straight to an overcorrection of these concepts.
It's like defund the police. It's an overcorrection because no one's saying like abolish all of it together. Like, yes, there has to be a structure in place. You know what I mean? To have a certain amount of order and protection. But we need to strip it down and call out the bad actors. You know what I mean? That operate in this really oppressive system.
Yeah. It's, yeah. So, overcorrection and extremely opposing beliefs can take over.
Mhm.
Um, but it's just like, you have to get through that, because at the end of the day, whatever toxic masculinity hurts men and women,
Yeah.
the same way white supremacy hurts white and black people, even though there is a party that benefits from this
Yes. Yes.
institution. The patriarchy, obviously, men are in power. White supremacy, white people have the power. But that doesn't mean that it's beneficial to both parties.
Even
Like,
them.
it's,
Yeah.
it's damaging to society all the way around. So I think I just had assumed in my mind that men who think like I do about these things wouldn't have an issue with that term, or would at least understand what it meant. And I was like, oh my God, like, maybe this needs to be a conversation that we have on the podcast, because
Mm-hmm.
maybe I'm just completely unaware of this misunderstanding that's actually bigger.
Yeah, and I brought this up in I think our red flag, green flag episode. Like, there a lot of this, I think been a rise in the conversation about toxic masculinity and what that even means because of the rise of Andrew Tate. And Andrew Tate is a force. I mean, he was just recently thrown out of thrown off of every social media platform, which is really
Mm-hmm.
good, and hopefully there's going to be a change coming up. But Andrew Tate and other like-minded, like uber masculine, toxic masculine
Yeah.
um voices and energies that are out there that are literally like women are my property. He would say, like, women are
Yeah.
property. Like, my bitch, he would always say, like, my
Ugh.
bitch, she can get an OnlyFans, but she gives me all the money because she's my girl. She's my
So
bitch.
you want to pimp her.
Right.
Got
Like,
it.
he's made a lot of money being a webcam pimp, an internet pimp. So, like, he has multiple girlfriends, which he prides himself in manipulating to do whatever he wants.
Wow.
And part of that is webcamming and giving him the money. And that's just like, and he also has like a pyramid scheme, like fucking business that also scams people in general. But he is so influential to young men because he offers them a very easy way out of their issues, right? Blame women. It's women's
Yeah.
problem. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's not your father's problem because he wasn't around, because he's himself is the son of a world-renowned chess player who was never around. And he's like, I had the best father. I had the best. He wasn't around because he doesn't need to. Men don't have to be around. You know what I
Oh
mean?
my
It's the
God.
woman's problem to take care of the children. And he'd cheat all the time, and that's fine. Like, he can cheat, you know what I mean? Men cheat. It's what they do.
Oof.
Women can't cheat, though. That's not in
Yeah.
women's nature. Fresh and Fit is also another podcast. It's like fucking like that, like super
Mhm.
uber and toxic masculine. But like the ripple effect of Andrew Tate, even though he's thrown off all of these platforms now, and that's really good. Like, teachers were talking about how, because school had recently started, back up again in August, and a middle school teacher whose students are 12 years old. This one kid, or no, group of boys were talking about how much they love Andrew Tate. And this one kid, he's 12 years old, went to another girl and said that you're useless. You use men for money. And
What?
was calling her a bitch, calling her useless, and that, like, you just use men for their money. They're 12 years old.
Wow.
And another problem there is that this teacher was saying there was an issue with first generation children from immigrant families who don't speak English very well. So they don't know what their kids are watching, and they don't know how harmful what their kids are watching
Interesting.
online, how harmful that can be to their mental health. And if they're
Wow.
learning and they're consuming all of this horrible, harmful, dangerous, toxic, masculine takes, they're 12 years old. That's going to rot their brain. This is like
and
a
their
very
parents don't even know.
they don't know. So this is just a really important conversation to have because of the rise in incel mentality of women suck.
Yeah.
We have to go back, and it's also a pushback. You know what I mean? This is all a pushback on the fact that we are being more welcoming to different genders and
Mhm.
different gender identities. You know what I mean? Like, what means a woman and what means a man, it's changing now. And we can be more expressive with how we express our gender. You know what I mean? We don't have, there's not these little boxes that we're in anymore. You know, people that were born biologically a man can wear a dress if they want to and still have a beard if they want to. They can do whatever they want, and people who have a lot of fucking mental health issues are going to push against that because it's a challenge. It's a challenge to them. They can't wrap their head around that. If it's confusing to them, that's dangerous. You know what I mean? It's like they conflate Alec Menon, who's a really amazing advocate for trans issues and gender issues. They spoke beautifully about this. It's like a lot of people who are who have toxic masculine traits conflate what is confusing to what is harmful to them. Like, just because you don't understand it doesn't mean that person doesn't deserve the rights to express themselves. It doesn't necessarily mean something bad's going to happen to you. It is okay if someone goes against the grain. And I feel like that is such a attributing factor to toxic masculinity as it stands today. You know what I mean? Like, just because what is confusing and not in the fucking rigid box of what masculinity means does not mean it's harmful or dangerous to society.
Yeah.
You just need to go to therapy.
Yeah.
Sorry. Anyway, so
for sure.
It's important to understand that damaging societal systems we have in place, such as the patriarchy and white supremacy, are actually damaging both. Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, it cut out for a second. Yeah.
Oh shoot. I'm going to say that again. It's important to understand that damaging societal systems we have in place, such as the patriarchy and white supremacy, are actually damaging to both sides, even though one side is the beneficiary of said system. With the patriarchy, even though men are the people in power, they are damaged by it themselves through toxic masculinity. An example of that are men are taught to not express emotion openly. This has extremely negative effects on men in our society, which then affects women as well. Like Andrew Tate is a perfect example of that. Like, he was raised to think that, emotions are wrong and they only solely belong to women.
And they're weak. And
you have to be a man and you have to step up and go to war.
Yeah.
And, you know what I mean? And like, you're in battle to be in. You have to be in peak physical state all the time. It's like,
relax.
Just go to therapy. Many men today are under the misconception that this means masculine traits in general are negative, when it's really addressing the danger of the exaggeration and extreme of these traits. For example, aggression isn't inherently a bad thing. It can be a helpful trait. However, when it's out of balance and exaggerated, this can turn to violence. Somewhere along the way, men need to educate themselves to the point of understanding the nuances and core meaning of this term if we are to evolve as a society. I mean, yeah, I feel like men, it's a very, very common thing. Like, the only emotion men know are anger. Most men, of course, we don't want to blanket. Most men know just anger as the sole emotion. They don't think anything, and they don't realize like that is an emotion itself. You know what I mean? They're like, I'm not emotional. I can't be emotional. It's like, well, you're angry all the time. Every time I see you, you're screaming.
Defensiveness, anger, because, and like, it's sad. Like, in this society, we raise boys, and in honestly most societies, that's why the patriarchy is all over the world. But we raise boys to not be in touch with certain sides of themselves, and then to see that as a strength. Because like I said earlier, masculinity in of itself is beautiful, and we all possess masculinity and femininity within us, no matter if we're a man or a woman. So there are traits that are masculine traits, such as aggressive behavior is considered a masculine trait. That's not always a bad thing. Like you just said, like, it's not.
No.
To be aggressive can be a good thing. It's needed at times. Like, that is part of survival.
And hustling.
And then when it's out of balance and exaggerated is when toxic masculinity comes into play. And that's what I think is being misunderstood. Because it's
when
like,
you're compensating for something.
Yeah, when it's not balanced when it's not used in the ways where it becomes helpful, it then can convert into violence. And it's like, that's where it comes from. And I think there's the whole, like, when women are really being reasonable and are educated on this issue, we're not saying all men are violent. Like, relax. We're not saying all men are this or that. All lives matter. We're
Yeah, I
not
know.
saying all men are this,
Hashtag not all men.
but like, it's so I think it needs to be a thing of men separating themselves and not getting defensive, and
Yeah.
and understanding that they are separate from this issue, and then reflect on themselves, like how they play a part. But like, when we say that certain masculine traits are over exaggerated, it's not emasculating to you. I'm not saying you are, you know what I mean? It's just like ego.
Yes. Oh, 100% ego. It's like
Mm-hmm.
when you let your ego be your driving force, you know what I mean? Driving force in how
Mm-hmm.
you approach every conversation or everything that ever happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not stable. You're not a stable
Mm-hmm.
person. According to an article on medicalnewstoday.com, in modern society, people often use the term toxic masculinity to describe exaggerated masculine traits, my mic is falling, that many cultures have widely accepted or glorified. This harmful concept of masculinity also places significant importance on manliness based on strength, lack of emotion, self-sufficiency, dominance, and sexual virility. Yeah, this is
Yep. And
literally Andrew
glorified. That's
Tate.
the thing. Not only
Yeah.
exaggerated and expected and taught, but glorified. Like
Yeah, it's like
the
this is the ideal.
superhero, all these
Hmm.
things of like, and that's why there's so much. This is how it damages men too. Is so much pressure on men to be the provider, take care of your family, and if you have like, if you aren't able to support your family financially, or like you lose your job or something happens, and it can feel like such a failure and hard to even talk to. I was watching some show the other night where this guy like lost his job, and his wife, he had a like very supportive wife and a very like seemingly healthy relationship with her, and he didn't tell her right away because he was so ashamed. And it was like, but you don't even have the type of relationship where your wife would be like, how could you do that? You know, she would have.
Hmm.
I was just watching the show and I'm like, this is crazy. Like, men have so much pressure on themselves because of how we raise them. Then they think that they are required to do these things that are actually inhuman all the time. No one can be the protector all the time. Even if
No.
you are a protective person and you can be, quote unquote, the protector of your family, whatever. But some days you're not, and nobody is one thing all the time. Like,
No.
women, you know, I'm using blanket generalizations and stereotypes, but like women being nurturing, great.
Hmm.
Men can be nurturing too, but like, I am not nurturing all the time. So it's like that doesn't make me less feminine. So according to traditional toxic masculine values, a male who does not display enough of these traits may fall short of being a real man. Overemphasis of these traits may lead to harmful imbalances and in someone trying to live up to these expectations. So imbalances. Some examples include aggression, sexual aggression or control, showing no emotion or suppressing emotions, hyper competitiveness, and that can go with defensiveness, I believe, like getting super defensive right away, needing to dominate or control others, a tendency towards or glorification of violence, isolation, low empathy, entitlement, chauvinism, and sexism. And all of these things can come out in different levels of, yeah. And isolation is one that I
Oh,
think is misunderstood a
yeah.
lot, because mental health is suicide in men is so much higher than women too. And it's like this isolation and not feeling like you can lean on anyone else. Like, this is dangerous.
Yeah, not only is the suicide rate higher in men, but men are killed
Depression. Oh
more
yeah.
as well. And
Correct.
by other men, you know what I mean? Like, it's
Yep.
just like y'all are dying, to
Yeah.
yourselves. Like,
Yeah.
um, and I say that because there's a lot of discourse on toxic masculinity and social media. Can't say toxic masculinity fast. Like on TikTok recently, there's like one video that went viral of a guy that like was showing pictures of like Harry Styles in a dress for Vogue and was like, "What happened to real men? What happened to real men?" And it's like, it's funny because a lot of people are like, "What? Go to war? Then go to war.
Right.
Enlist. There are recruiters right now at
Right.
like your grocery store. Go enlist. It's like,
Mhm.
you don't really, a lot of them don't really fucking believe what they have to say. Again, it's
No.
just ego that they're trying to feed. Like, you
Yeah.
don't actually want to go back to like the good old days of like how, men were the providers and women were stay-at-home cooks. Like, you don't actually want to do that.
Right.
Um, you just want someone else to blame, when
Mhm.
it's like the calls
Mhm.
coming from inside the house.
You're feeling threatened, and so you wanna assert
Exactly.
your masculinity in a way that is actually, like, very revealing in your insecurity.
Exactly. So, what issues can toxic masculinity cause when a boy or adult male views the world through the narrow lens provided by these exaggerated masculine traits? They may feel that they will only gain acceptance by living up to these traits. Unchecked toxic masculinity and the behaviors it can cause may lead to a variety of issues, such as bullying, school discipline, academic challenges, jail, prison time, domestic violence, sexual assault, risky behaviors like substance abuse. There's suicide, psychological trauma, lack of friendships or genuine connections. And then,
Mhm.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I feel like there's so many men that I've known throughout my entire life and boys that suffered from all of these things.
Yeah.
And some theories indicate that toxic masculinity plays a role in physical health. Toxic masculinity may prevent some men from seeking out help for possible health issues or other potential problems because
Yes.
I don't need to. I'm a man. I'm gonna fight through this pain,
There was,
or
like,
I'm gonna, or it's like I don't know. It's sissy to like
yeah,
go
like,
to the
to
doctor
get
and
help,
complain
to
about
ask for
something. Yeah,
to admit that
exactly.
you don't know everything or you can't solve everything is, like, weakness, and you won't do it. Like, it's
Right.
so toxic. There was this reel that was going viral on Instagram, and it was fun. It was like a comedian, he was doing these skits, playing off of this, and he would say stuff like, he's like, "Is your leg falling off? Don't go to a doctor. Die. Be a real man."
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, just, like,
Exactly.
random, and he had a lot of different scenarios, but it was just making fun of, like, "Oh, you're being a real man means, like, doing all this ridiculous shit that, like, it's just like, oh, you're gonna lose the love of your life? Let her go. Be a real man. Don't tell her how you feel." Like, all that kinda stuff where it's just like, what are we doing? Like, why are
It's
we
so
telling
good.
men this? I know, it's really funny. I need to find it. Maybe
Be a
if I
real
find it, I'll share
man.
it. Be a real man. Don't tell her you love her. Just, like, love her secretly or some weird shit that I'm just like, but it's real. It's not even
Yeah.
exaggerated. It's, like, put in a funny context, but it's real. Like,
Yeah.
men will not say things because they feel
Perceive
like
it
it.
as weak. Yeah.
Yeah, like, I'm weak or I don't know. And the lack of friendships or genuine connections, like that being a symptom, because it doesn't always, it can be easy for someone, especially someone like, say you have a son and you're trying to see, like, oh, is he showing any signs of, like, what toxic this list, you said bullying or school discipline or jail or prison time, domestic violence. There's some extreme situations in there, but, like, well, no, my son isn't, like, violent. He's not getting in trouble at school. He's not in jail. Like, he's not sexually assaulting anyone. No
That you
substance
know of.
abuse. Like, yeah, but a lack of friendships or genuine connections is also a sign, and that's like, it's a common thing in society. And I know there are differences between men and women. Like, I'm not here to pretend like there's not, but it's accepted in society to, like, the amount of times I catch up with girlfriends, like you and I'll go get drinks or go get breakfast or go get a coffee, and I have girlfriends that I do that with somewhat regularly. And it's less common for men to do that if they do have, like, days with their guys, or, like, they're going to watch a game, or they're doing something that they're not just sitting and talking for a couple hours, which I
Mm-hmm.
do with my girlfriends often. And I know that women are more inclined to do that than men in general, but it's not encouraged. And actually, it's seen as weird. And men are afraid that if I just go and sit and talk with a guy at a restaurant for a couple hours, people are gonna think I'm gay. Like, all that stuff comes in, and
Oh
it's just
yeah.
like, my God, we don't even let them foster these relationships that we as women benefit from very strongly, and they don't even do that.
Yeah, and people talk about how like that's why video games are such a big outlet for men because they can talk to each other
Yes.
as an outlet in these like,
Yeah.
fucking Call of Duty lobbies where they can talk to each other, and it's like it's just an
Mhm.
excuse so you can hang out with your friend, but it's in the
Exactly.
guise
Like you
of
can
like,
talk
no,
with someone.
we're playing a first person shooter.
Yeah, we're playing a killing game,
We're
but
not
hey,
really
dude,
hanging
what's
out.
up?
It's
Like,
like, no, you're actually fostering like deep friendships. Like a lot of men like
yeah.
foster deep friendships by playing video games, and they don't realize like that's just their way. That's their brunch. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
because they're not and it's not to say that men can't do. Obviously, there are men that do and they're free to, but the way it's looked upon in society and the way they're raised, it's not
Yeah.
welcomed. It's not encouraged. It's not really, they don't have many examples of that. And so, yeah, it's
Yep.
that's interesting. I never thought about that as a community building, but
hmm
yeah, that's absolutely what it is.
That and playing
Um,
golf are like
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
men's
It's like you got to
excuses
do
for hanging out.
something manly while you're talking so that you
Yeah.
feel like it's okay.
Yep. Exactly.
So the
Sport.
American what?
Yeah, like sports and stuff
Yeah,
like that.
yeah. The American Psychological Association notes the dangers of trying to adhere to these exaggerated masculine traits. Men and boys forced to cling to these traits often experience adverse effects and may face problems such as depression, body image issues, poor social function, substance abuse, and stress. Furthermore, as feeling emotional or talking openly about feelings go against these traditional masculine values, there is the added risk that men experiencing mental health issues might not even seek out professional care or even talk about their struggles with their friends or family. For some males, asking for help may lead to feelings of inadequacy, weakness, and perceptions of being less of a man. And that is that's like the silent danger, because that's where it spirals, and at its worst it leads to suicide or
Yep.
extreme violence against others, sexual assault. Like, but it starts there. It's like this isolation in their mind, and then they don't feel like they can reach out to like therapists, let alone just their loved ones. Like in that show I was
Yeah.
watching, the guy had a loving relationship with his wife who was very supportive and understanding and still was afraid to say something. It's like, my God, what are we doing? Like, how are we raising these boys?
Not well, I mean, not at all. That's the
Not at
thing. It's like
all.
that's why they all say boys are easier to raise because they don't do any raising.
Right.
They hyper focus on raising teenage girls to be pure and conservative, you know what I
Yeah.
mean, to dress conservatively, don't date until you're 17 or
Yeah.
18. You got to get the good grades. You got to, make sure you're not wearing a spaghetti strap to school.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be a tease. Don't go drinking, go party. But boys, you know what I mean? There's a pat on the back if they lose their virginity at 13.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like there
And
is no
even when
raising
it's
when it
not,
comes to boys.
even when it's not something so extreme, like a pat on the back for that, but like even I remember, and I know there are differences because women are in danger in certain situations where men are not. Like, women can be physically overpowered by men much easier than a man can be by a woman. So I understand that. But like, I'm thinking of when I was growing up, there were formal dances in my high school that started like freshman year. We could start going to formal dances. So we're 14. And my freshman year, my parents told me I wasn't allowed to go. And the whole school, everybody went. It's like an organized school event, like a formal, but they wouldn't let me go. And I was furious. I felt like it was so unfair. And then 2 years later, my brother is a freshman in high school, and I might have told this story on the podcast. Like, to their credit, they approached me first because they said, Molly, we remember that we told you you couldn't go. We were considering telling Dylan he can go. How do you feel about that? Like,
Wow.
they gave me that respect, but and of course, and I was like, well, I think he should be able to go because I should have been able to go. Like, there's no reason
Right.
he should be able to go. But I thought it was interesting. I was upset, but them approaching me like that made me feel respected to where I wasn't like pissed at them, but I was also like, okay, so you're acknowledging that this isn't fair. And I think
Yeah.
that's, aside from the healthy differences, it is different raising a girl and a boy. Like, I say that because it's like maybe they're more nervous about me getting taken advantage of. But also at 14 years old, like, I was the same size as Dylan, like my brother, so it's like, there are certain things where, yeah, you might be more nervous about your daughter doing it than your son. However, there is a line somewhere, and there are unconscious biases that happen that I'm like, why are you just you see that with your son, you were going to say yes. And
Yeah.
I couldn't go. And why is that? And I consider, and my parents are not the type to like pat on the back, lose your virginity to your son. It's not the good
Yeah,
old
yeah,
boys.
yeah,
My
yeah.
parents aren't even like that, but even they had they did that, where I'm just like,
Yeah.
dang, like we all have these unconscious biases aside from the conscious ones that are like, that's not fair.
Yeah,
Like,
because
and
it's
then,
easier to
yeah,
protect tell your daughter, you know what I mean? Like, don't do this. Protect yourself this way, protect yourself that way. You can't go
mm-hmm.
to this because you got to protect yourself this way. Then to teach your boy not to assault. You know what I mean? Like, don't get
Yes.
assaulted, then teaching your boy to not assault. You know what I
To
mean?
not treat women poorly. You treat women to expect to be treated poorly and how to
Right.
handle it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but that's society. You know what I mean? Like that's a
Yeah.
learned thing that so many parents have
Exactly.
realized like, oh, okay, I get it. This is the way I have to raise my son because
And then even men are raised, like one of my friends recently, who's very, like he thinks like I do about all these things, and he's a grown man, and was like mansplaining, like, when you go on, I don't know why this came up. It wasn't directly at me, but he was using examples of like how to stay safe when you're walking around or something. But he
mm,
was like, like don't keep both headphones in at the same time. And I had to stop him, and I'm like, I'm s- I'm sorry. I have known these things. Let me list for you the things that I do when I'm walking in broad daylight, let alone at night, that I'm always
yeah,
thinking about, all these little things that I'm doing. And you're
yeah,
telling me to make sure you don't have both headphones in, where I'm just like, okay, but also I'm doing this and this and this and this and this. And this. I would never put both headphones in. And men, so even quote unquote, the good men are raised to, because the instinct you do want, if you're raising daughters, for example, you want to teach them those things. You do want to, because you know how the world is. You know how men are. Yeah, like you need to teach them those safety aspects. But like even they're not necessarily thinking of like, okay, but how would I coach a man like a young boy to
mm-hmm,
operate when he's walking around? And
exactly.
but the concern comes from a valid place of like, women are in danger. We are oppressed. We are, unfortunately, yes. So it's not a bad thing to like want to make sure women know those things, but the other side is missing.
Exactly. We can't be the only ones that get the rules of what to do and
Yes.
what not to do. Like
Yeah.
it's just here we are. Here we are.
Yep.
Like as of 2018, significantly more men than women died from an opioid overdose. Men are far more likely to die by suicide than women. Men, like women, experience anxiety, depression, and mental illness. However, men are more likely than women to underutilize mental health services, and they are more reluctant to seek help, especially when it comes to mental health. So it's not just the
Mhm.
physical health, it's obviously the mental health as well. If they're going to ignore
Mhm.
that, they're going to ignore the other because it's a sign of weakness. Um, as it's learned in our society. As a country, we often fail to address the many traumas faced by boys and men, and we often punish behaviors without addressing the
Yes.
underlying issues that lead to those behaviors. It's like our fucking prison system. It's like
Yeah.
that's like
Yeah.
like a meta, not a metaphor,
Mhm.
but an actual
Yeah, example.
example. We need to eliminate the stigma around mental illness and remind men that are asking for help, expressing emotions, and seeking therapy that it isn't just beneficial, it's necessary for the betterment of our society.
Yes, because I mean, we really do fail men. The patriarchy fails men in
Hell
so many
fucking
ways, and
yeah.
this is one of the biggest ones. We don't address the traumas faced by boys and men because there are a lot of them. There's a reason they're depressed and stressed out and have anxiety and feel these pressures. And but we don't care for them. We just punish them, make assumptions, throw them in jail, put them in the,
Mm-hmm.
you know, expel them. Boys are like, we just
Boys will
throw
be
them straight
boys.
into the punishment realm, which then just enforces for them even more like authority and power. This is power, and this is, it just goes. It's just feeds itself so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. I mean, toxic masculinity is a cancer. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And it's not like we're going to, right now, if someone had cancer right now, we're gonna be like, well, the cancer will cancer. You know what I mean?
Yep.
As it spreads, that's it. We got to turn the other way now. No, you're
Cancer
gonna
gonna
go to the
cancer.
doctors. You're gonna get, on chemo or whatever you need to
Hmm.
to eliminate the cancer in your body. Why can't we do
Hmm.
the same about the cancer in our society? We can't look the other way.
Yes.
It's not cancer will be cancer. It's not boys will be boys.
Yeah.
We have to radiate your toxic masculinity, and that's by asking for help. It's by reminding them that you are worthy of introspection. You are worthy of
Yes.
forgiveness. You are worthy of therapy and love and
And that's what makes you a
empathy.
more complete, elevated man. That actually makes you more of a man to
Yes.
be in touch with these things
And
to
communicate. Mhm.
yes. Yeah, and then like this is a whole other aspect of it, but I want to acknowledge it. There's so many deeper layers in this because while this is the case for men, it's even more exaggerated in certain communities like Black men. It's even
Mm.
worse with Black men. Like they're even less like
And minority
encouraged
groups. Yeah.
minorities and in general. So like there are layers to all of it. And I just wanted to acknowledge that because it's like it goes deep, 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 deep. And so the men
Mhm.
that are out there that are doing this work to deprogram themselves of what society has programmed you into, I have a lot of admiration for and respect for and thank you because it it takes more
A
than
lot.
just women screaming for change, because it's men who need to do it. And so at the end of the day, it's about understanding that you can be masculine without being toxic. That term is not saying masculinity is toxic. That is not saying that. You can be masculine without being toxic.
Mhm.
And that society has programmed a lot of toxic ideas into our minds of what a man should or shouldn't be. Hopefully these conversations like we're having right now can continue to be had so that we can remove the defensiveness that some men feel when this term is brought up. It's a complete misunderstanding and it can't just stop there. Like hopefully you have the energy if you ever come up against that with a man who bristles at this term instead of being like, ugh, whatever, he doesn't get it and walk away. Cause sometimes you have to just do that. But
Yeah.
hopefully you can find the energy at times to engage and be like, okay, I think let's get into this. Like I had
Yeah.
to
Let's
do, and it
unpack
was
it.
an hour and a half. It's a dedicated amount of time, but I'm like, why do you feel this way about this word? I don't think you know what it means. And then you're up against a defensive, I know, but you got to break through all that. And hopefully, I mean,
Yeah.
no one's saying masculine traits are bad. It's because when in balance, they're beautiful.
Yeah. And again, if you have the energy, it's like, we don't want to say the same thing. It's like, as a Black person, you don't want to be the one to always educate the, white people.
Not
It's
your
like,
responsibility.
yeah. So we want to let her know to our male audiences that like have these conversations with your male friends, have these conversations with your parents, your dad, your brother, you know what I
Yes.
mean? Your son. Please have these conversations because, it can't just be women reminding you all the time. You know what I mean? It shouldn't, Molly shouldn't have had to have that, energy. But if you do, please do it. But if you don't, it makes sense because we're tired.
Right.
We're
Yes.
tired. We're exhausted.
Exhausted.
Please take the onus and responsibility to have those difficult conversations within yourselves because it's only going to benefit you.
Like educate
and your
yourself.
family.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yep.
yeah, I mean, we're going to link the articles that helped us with this episode in our show notes. So check those out. Check us out on and then like shout out to Black Lives Matter as well.
Yes.
And then, check us out on Instagram, Twitter at the SOS Pod. We're SOS with Molly and Alyssa on YouTube and on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Please rate and review us as well as subscribing to those things. The reviewing really helps us reach more people. And we're on Patreon, guys. $3,
That's right, we are.
$7, $11. You get some exclusive content, exclusive merch, and the chance to suggest our episode topics. And we can talk about whatever juicy thing you want to hear us talk about.
Exactly. I'm Molly Cottrell.
I'm Melissa Rosano.
Here's to turning meltdowns
Into magic.